Spearheaded by Devil May Cry director Hideaki Itsuno, Dragon's Dogma is often overlooked in the list of last gen's best RPGs. Inspired by Western Goliaths like Skyrim, Capcom challenged itself to create its own fantasy epic. In practice though, well, it was far from a simple project. But this month, the enhanced Dark Arisen version arrives on Nintendo Switch, giving us a chance to reassess how it holds up on more modern hardware, and as a portable experience too. How does it run? And does it have more in common with the PS4 and Xbox One Remaster than the PS3 and 360 originals? Let's find out. Developed over the course of 3 years, Dragon's Dogma runs on MT framework, common to most of its games at the time. Following its work on Devil May Cry 4, it made sense for the team to use familiar engine tech. However, it was a break away from the linear structure of most AAA titles to that point. Using the limited resources of PS3 and Xbox 360 at the time, the team made a rare push for a fully open world design. Ultimately though, and while the mechanics hang together well enough, the frame rate struggled on those machines. Pop-in was an issue, and frankly, texture work all round doesn't hold up so well. So what of the Switch release? Docking Switch under a TV shows a marked upgrade in several respects. Okay, it keeps certain advanced techniques like crepuscular rays and dynamic shadows, both of which were present on last gen back in 2012. Sunlight flits beautifully between trees, from the grey skies blanketing the game's opening scenes. Meanwhile, character shadows are a real feature of underground dungeons and night battles. Torchlight creates a sharp directional shadow, much in the same way Dark Souls 2 characters form silhouettes on the scenery around bonfires. It gives light a great sense of impact to these scenes, where lanterns are often crucial to making progress. There are clear upheavals elsewhere though. Native resolution for one gets pushed higher on Switch to 1600 by 900 while docked. At 900p, it's a more passable experience that works on modern 1080p TVs, and it retains a similar post-process anti-aliasing setup to the original game too. That's a big upgrade on the 1280 by 720 image on PlayStation 3 for example. Side by side, it's also impossible to ignore the change in aspect ratio on Switch. We're now filling out the full 16 by 9 screen real estate, whereas PS3, in practice, well, uniquely, it aimed for a filmic 2.35 to 1 style presentation, which actually meant it only ran at a native 1280 by 608 resolution. It's a full-on improvement, although inevitably it falls short of the PS4 version's full 1080p image. Where does the Switch release stand visually then? Inevitably, it does fall between, say, the PS3 and PS4 releases in terms of graphic settings. Comparing Nintendo's hybrid with the last-gen machine first, clearly there's changes to texture quality. Even a close-up of the lead character's clothing shows a boosted high-grade asset on Nintendo's machine. In truth, these textures aren't exactly showcase material for any platform, but the bottom line is Switch is using the same asset as the newer PS4 edition. Now, Switch is capable of more flattering material work in an open world design. Indeed, games tailored for the hardware, like the excellent Xenoblade Chronicles 2, already proves the point that the machine can be pushed to more eye-catching results even at scale. But relative to the console versions of Dragon's Dogma out already, the Switch version at least doesn't fall short. Of course, the PC version reigns supreme in terms of scaling to higher resolutions, but even looking at PC, that same shirt material on our character, yep, it's the same as what we have on Switch. It doesn't look great no matter what platform you're playing on. How about comparisons to the PS4 release then? Surprisingly, Switch's 4GB RAM allocation is more than enough to cope with a game that, ultimately, was built for a console generation standardized on 512MB of memory. Texture work maxes out on both. There may be a few differences in spots, and certainly texture filtering quality takes a hit on Switch as per usual with most ports, but the bulk of play reveals an exact match in the open world, interiors, and up close on characters. The more obvious difference is in shadows. Look close and you can catch a big difference here. Switch misses the sharp, clear outlines available on PS4. Then again, it boasts a higher preset than the blurrier shade outlines of last-gen machines. Just as with the resolution situation, it finds a nice middle ground that suits the hardware spec well, though some flickering shadows do remain. There are a scattering of other minor changes, ambient occlusion shade being one of them. PS4's implementation is more refined and less thick than Switch's, but easily the bigger issue is world detail itself. Up close, both versions load the same assets in at likewise quality, but here's the point. PS4's draw distances for foliage, objects and NPCs are much further afield. Switch users are setting much closer to last-gen consoles, and it must be said it stands out at the high 900p native res it pushes. The result is you'll see much more pop-in than you're used to by today's standards. It doesn't take any slow-motion shot or zooms to catch it. Almost every area, barring dungeons, just has pieces of the world pop into view right in front of you. In a similar vein, Dragon's Dogma is a little rough around the edges in terms of glitches. More than once I've caught NPCs jittering around on the spot or in the corner, just as they did on release 7 years ago. It's fair to say Capcom's RPG isn't a looker on that big screen, but it's far more flattering when played handheld. That 6-inch display really hides many of the game's rough points, and the fact is taking direct capture of Switch in portable mode shows every asset, all settings, and even the level of pop-in are identical to the docked experience. Side by side, the only real cutback is in resolution. You're not getting a 720p image here sadly, rather the typical number is 1024 by 576 to my testing. At 576p, we're looking at 56% of the pixels pushed of the screen's maximum 720p, so there is a real saving on the GPU bandwidth there, and certainly compared to the 900p while docked. In terms of performance, most of Capcom's choices here are geared towards getting Switch running at 30fps locked, just like PS4. Docked under a TV, that's precisely what we get most of the time, and the comparison against PS3 really shows just how far we've come. The resolution is higher, textures are sharper, shadows are improved, and frame rates soar far over PS3's wavering 20 to 30fps range. Back in the day, it could even dip into the teens when pushed, but not so on Switch. The bottom line is, for all the limits this version does have in draw distance, the saving grace is it at least runs well most of the time. That's not to say it's perfect by any means. You'll have no doubt spotted the little fluctuations in frame pacing on the left side graph, and that means we're face to face with our old arch nemesis, bad frame pacing. So yes, frame time spikes are an issue on Switch. It's not the worst we've seen at Digital Foundry, but the 30fps cap here has a clear flaw on console, a trouble even the PS3 edition had in the rarer instances it hits that ceiling. And that's not to say the Switch version is untouchable in hitting 30fps either. The initial dragon battle shows heavy alpha can still tank the console's performance down to near 20fps. This moment is the worst spot I've encountered so far, thankfully, but there is potential for similar results later on. Clearly though, Switch is the smoother way to play the game. That being said, PS4 still shows how much better it could be, running at 1080p with a near faultless 30fps. The frame pacing issue is still there, and some stutters interrupt play, but it clears up the drops Switch has with its TV playback. Quite how this one isn't running at 60fps is a surprise, and so obviously PC remains the best pick if you're after the highest refresh. As an example of what Switch misses though, it's got to be said, barring a few drops, it holds up rather well to PS4 given the huge gulf in GPU power between them. Plus, it does at least run fully V-Synced as well, which wasn't the case on the Xbox 360 version back in the day. The ace in the hand for Switch is the portable play. Sadly, this is where the package falls a bit short, and frame rates just aren't as strong as you might expect. The cutback in resolution is huge, but it's still not enough to offset the drop in GPU bandwidth while running off the battery. Taken in comparison, it's dropping to the 20fps line, though not quite as drastically as PS3. That's coupled with similar frame pacing troubles as the regular dock play too. It's easy to compare in-engine cutscenes to get a sense of the delta between docked and portable play. However, the reality of unscripted, freeform gameplay follows the same pattern. I've seen enough drops in regular play to say mid-20s frame rates will seep into the experience. Gather enough pawns, fire off enough effects, and that line will start tumbling in portable play. The saving grace is, these drops are better hidden when played on Switch's smaller screen, but that shouldn't really be the excuse. It's really a bit of a shame more couldn't be done to mitigate these drops, especially with such aggressive cuts in resolution and tolerating the pop-in too. Dragon's Dogma is an interesting exercise in making use of Switch. For one, it's remarkable how much of the PS4 release carries over, especially in the texture work. Then again, it is a game with inherent limits, and draw distances are very much of last-gen standard. Capcom's experiment in open world design paid off, but there is a sense Switch is capable of much more with dedicated development, tailored purely to the system. Dragon's Dogma is nonetheless a solid RPG with a decent technical backbone, and there's plenty here to sink your teeth into. Just be prepared to feel the ripple effect of Capcom's efforts to work around last-gen limits as you play, even today. But that's all I have time for. If you did appreciate this analysis, do feel free to like or subscribe to our channel to support what we do at Digital Foundry. And don't forget to hit the bell to get notifications as any video lands. Check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net for the source file to this analysis, and to get in touch with me directly, just use Twitter. But from me for now, thanks for watching.